And welcome back to Sitting in a Car. I'm Sarah Sproul and I sit in a car with you each week answering a question to help you raise your confident and caring young person who respects themselves and the people around them. And the question for this week is, I was 18 and my cousin was 12 and my aunt asked me to explain puberty and menstruation to my cousin. The questions and evolution of those conversations went further than my aunt, and my aunt was horrified. And that is now stuck in my mind whenever I talk to my kids on what is age appropriate. I actually heard a story a little bit like this a few weeks ago from a completely different parent. And their story was told from the viewpoint of the 12-year-old. They were a 12-year-old and their 15-year-old neighbor taught them what sex was. And that experience was overwhelmingly positive because the neighbor was able to describe what would happen and told this 12-year-old that they would never have to do anything they didn't want to do, and it was nothing like what you might see in the movies or on TV. And this 12-year-old who was telling me this story was so grateful for the information because they hadn't been told anything like that before. And while the person that asked this question may be remembering back to that time with a sense of sort of dread and unhappiness, it doesn't necessarily mean that the conversations she was having or they were having were wrong. It just means that the adults around them were horrified at what was going on and didn't think it was age appropriate. There are so many examples of stories where adults don't think something is age appropriate and the child is starving or delighted to have any sort of information. And my first point to make is that as a general rule, adults will err on the side of not giving information because they don't think it's age appropriate, when the reality of it is kids can deal with a lot of information from a very early age. We can be talking about pregnancy with children who are 4, even younger, if pregnancy is part of their world. And so point 1, err on the side of it's probably going to be okay, particularly if they're asking questions. Point 2, children will sort of block out or phase out if the information that they are hearing is not relevant to them. You will have heard me tell the story probably so many times by now that when I was 9 and I was with my friend Libby who knew everything, she told me how babies were made. And when I went back to my mum to check, years and years later, and ask Mum why I didn't know how babies were made when I was 9, Mum said, "Sarah, you did know. I'd been talking to you about how babies were made around the time you were 6 when I was pregnant with your brother. But, the story must go that I either forgot or it wasn't relevant to me at the time. And so when I needed the information, it wasn't available to me in my memory." And so just because we talk about things with our kids doesn't mean that they're going to remember that information. It may not be relevant, it may not be useful to them, or they may just not even need it. Point number 3. Oftentimes bad experiences to do with finding out information about sexuality, puberty, or bodies doesn't happen because the information is age appropriate, but those sort of negative memories that we might all have about that is to do with the fact that we weren't given any warning, or there was no sort of lead up to a conversation, that it was sort of from 0 to 100, using language of Fast and Furious, 0 to 100 in 3 seconds, instead of this ongoing, gentle, often conversation that slowly built up over time. So remember that it's not actually about whether information is age appropriate or enough. It's more about the context that information is given to us in. So if you have young children who you want to give information to about the world and about their body, it's not a sit-down conversation at the dinner table or in the car or while walking the dog. It's more about an ongoing, gentle introduction of lots of different sort of topics and subjects as you go along. The final point to make, and this is point number 4, is that conversations about puberty and menstruation can be happening way before they are personally relevant to a child that we are raising. When we talk about puberty and menstruation, maybe to a child who is 6, 7 in the context of perhaps teenagers that they know, or perhaps our own body that is menstruating, or stories about when we were going through puberty. We lay the groundwork for them to understand that this is going to happen to them as well. And we also give them permission to talk about it. Not only that, we show them that we're open and willing to connect with them about topics to do with their body and all those icky, weird things that might eventually happen. And that's good. We're good with that. We're going to be talking to it about it from a very young age, and they will get the hint. Not just because we say to them, you know, you can come to me and talk about anything, right? Instead, we show them that we can talk about anything and it's all right. So let's recap those points. Kids won't remember information if it's not personally relevant for them. You don't need to worry about damaging your child by telling them something a little bit too soon. But at the same time, children do get upset if they haven't had any conversations to do with bodies and babies and sex and puberty, and then all of a sudden an adult springs something on them. So it's important to start these conversations early. And the third thing is, conversations about puberty and menstruation can happen so much earlier than what most adults think. We can prepare our kids for all those experiences by talking about them really young. Now, if you've heard this advice and you realize that actually you're not sure how to start these conversations, you're in luck, because this month on May the 25th, my workshop series, and it's free, called Become a Comfortable Parent, is starting up. And it's a workshop series to help you get more comfortable starting these conversations with your children. You can sign up at sarahsproul.com/comfortable. And that's sitting in a car for another week where I've answered a question to help you raise your confident and caring young person who respects themselves and the people around them. And while I've got you here, can I ask for your help? Would you like, repost or subscribe to Sitting in a Car? This helps other parents just like you do this part of their parenting even better. Thanks and bye for now.